Chapter 24. And Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came to him to shew him the buildings of the temple. And Jesus said unto them, See ye not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. And as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be? And what shall be the sign of thy coming, and of the end of the world? And Jesus answered and said unto them, Take heed that no man deceive you. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilences, and earthquakes in divers places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. And then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another. And many false prophets shall rise, and shall deceive many. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. But he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations. And then shall the end come. When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand.
On September 4th through the 23rd, 2016, a major event will occur in the Old City of Jerusalem. It will bring together actors, artists, musicians, and persons in the media from around the world. What on earth are they planning to do in Jerusalem? At an event that ends on September 23rd, leaders from Roman Catholic, Muslim, and Jewish communities will gather for one of the longest interfaith services in history, right there in the Old City of Jerusalem, right there where the Lord Jesus walked, right there where the temples once stood. They will offer worship to a God under the banner of ecumenism. It is there they plan to do away with categories of religion and ignore differences. The service will combine 3 monotheistic faiths under one roof in a house of worship for all believers. One part of the event will occur from September 5th through the 11th and will bring together Jew, Muslim, and Christian under, quote, a passion for Jerusalem, in which they can all coexist temporarily under the wings of the Almighty, unquote. Some of the headlines on the website for this event talk about dissolving boundaries and coming together in worship of the same God. Another part of the event will occur from September 12th through the 23rd. The leaders of this event, which is called Mekudeshet, will perform an 11-day consecration. If you aren't aware, a consecration happens when somebody performs a ceremony declaring something as holy. The fact that Muslims, Jews, and Roman Catholics are gathering for a consecration means that they are all declaring their interfaith religion, their new God, to be holy. This is not good and may signal the beginning of the one world religion that Pope Francis has worked so hard to achieve in the year 2016. The Vatican, indeed, is one of the chief proponents of the ecumenical movement around the world and in Israel. For the past 3 years, Pope Francis has worked tirelessly toward a new world religion in which all denominations are brought together as one. If you look at Francis's outreach over the past 3 years, and specifically in 2016, you'll find somebody who has openly condemned evangelical Christianity and the belief that you must have a personal relationship with Jesus. He has openly warned that this belief is dangerous. He has also equated the spread of the gospel under evangelical Christianity to jihadism. In the meantime, he has done quite a bit of outreach to every other religion in the entire world. Why is this happening? The extent of Francis's outreach to other denominations in 2016 alone has been mind-boggling. In February, Francis held an emergency meeting with Patriarch Kirill of Russia for the first time since the 1054 Schism. Kirill then went directly to Antarctica. What was the reason behind Obama's secret trip to Antarctica? What was the reason for CIA Director James Clapper's simultaneous visit to Australia? Why did Russia's top religious leader go to Antarctica? There has been a virtual media blackout about these highly unusual trips made by officials in Russia and the US. There are a couple of sources that cited Obama traveled to the southern tip of Argentina before crossing the Drake Passage to Antarctica. Indeed, Obama's secret trip comes at a highly unusual time. It follows on the heels of a visit by Patriarch Kirill of Russia. Kirill met with Pope Francis in Havana, Cuba, less than 1 week before he departed for Antarctica. Media sources described the meeting between the two religious leaders as urgent. Nothing like this has happened since the 1054 AD schism that separated Eastern Orthodoxy and Roman Catholicism. Why an urgent meeting between these leaders was called after a millennium of never meeting with one another is a mystery. The mainstream media reported that the meeting between Francis and Kirill was meant to condemn persecution of Christians around the world and to foster ecumenical dialogue. But again, it comes at an unusual time, because 4 days after this meeting, Kirill arrived in Antarctica and performed a religious ceremony blessing the land and water surrounding the continent. He praised the barren lands of Antarctica as, quote, a model of an ideal humanity. Kirill also said the following, quote, Antarctica is the only place where there are no weapons, no military activity, there are no scientific studies focused on the emergence of a new means of destruction. It is a perfect image of humanity and a testimony to the fact that people can live like this. No borders, no weapons, no hostile competition, that they can cooperate and feel as members of one family, unquote. The reason I find Obama and Russian visits to Antarctica very strange is the following. There was another country, another regime, that visited Antarctica just before a Great World War started. The Nazis led an expedition of 33 members, including scientists, to Antarctica, just before the start of World War II in September 1939. Their expedition to New Swabia lasted from December 1938 to February 1939. It is known that the Nazis took thousands of photos using airplanes during this expedition. They also took reels of colored film, which was rare at the time and very expensive to produce. The regime was clearly looking for something in Antarctica. But what was it? What were they there for? 2 earlier expeditions to Antarctica by the Nazis were also very alarming. They were intent to map out the terrain of the continent, using hot air balloons for aerial footage. The Nazis even attempted, during these two expeditions, to walk across the entire continent and map out its landscape. It's still unclear why they engaged in so much surveying. Let us go back to World War II and listen to an interview given by an American naval officer named Richard Byrd. Byrd was stationed and lived in Antarctica for some time. Byrd made astonishing claims about the continent, that it could be the key to a future controversy that would erupt between various countries, not merely regarding the issue of resources, that precious metals, mineral deposits, and even uranium have been found in Antarctica. No, Richard Byrd seems to suggest that something else was there.
Admiral Byrd, you've been to both the North Pole and the South Pole. Is there any unexplored land left on this Earth that might appeal to adventurous young Americans?
Yes, there is. And not up around the North Pole, because it's getting crowded up there now, because they find out it's really usable, not only to live in, but militarily. But strangely enough, there's left in the world today an area as big as the United States that's never been seen by a human being. And that's beyond the pole, on the other side of the South Pole, from Middle America. And I think it's quite astonishing that there should be an area as big as that unexplored.
This is a tremendous
So
challenge.
there's a lot of adventure left down at the bottom of the world.
Admiral, an expedition to which I believe you're the advisor is now en route. What is that expedition doing?
Well, that's the icebreaker Atka, and it's a reconnaissance expedition. It's going down to the South Pole area to make certain observations and to look for some bases. They will be back in April, and they will report back, and upon the information we get from that undertaking, we will base the bigger expedition that's to follow.
Is that very definitely planned, or is that...
That is being planned right now. So I'm willing to say to you that there will be a number of expeditions that will follow, I think, year after year.
Richard Byrd verified that Antarctica wasn't about resources, but rather that the Nazis had established secret bases for some reason. Perhaps they were protecting something. Operation High Jump, coordinated by Byrd, which included US, Russian, Australian, and British forces, was meant to close in on the Nazis' strange operations in Antarctica. We'll return to Richard Byrd later on in this video. The logo for the Nazis' third expedition to Antarctica shows that they were interested in a particular portion of the continent called New Swabia. You can see on this emblem that there were lines drawn to bring your attention to an exact coordinate, ending on a particular target. Perhaps the Nazis were hiding a secret in plain sight, that they had located something. Were they pointing us, perhaps, to a hole that existed into the earth? A pathway into the center of a hollow earth. There is evidence to suggest that the Nazis believed in the hollow earth and held to an understanding that perhaps there was a passageway to the other side. While hollow earth is not a popular idea these days, it was during World War II. In fact, it was suggested that most of the top Nazi officials believed in a hollow earth concept. Many within Nazi pop culture also believed in a hollow earth, including German writer Karl Neupert. In the book called Between Science and Fiction, The Hollow Earth as Concept and Conceit, the author documents that Neupert began what appeared to be a cult following of hollow earth believers in Germany at the time. The idea was that the earth was shaped like an eyeball, a portal leading into it where the North Pole is located, and another portal leading into it where the South Pole is located. The inner portion of the earth is hollow. Likewise, the eye has an entry where blood is pumped into it, but the actual eye globe is hollow, filled with a substance called vitreous humor to protect it. Toward the end of the eye, a lens is located that resembles a mass of land in an ocean. At the center of this landmass is another hole, the pupil. The strange resemblance between Hollow Earth and a human eyeball is unmistakable. Antarctica was a point of entry into the very pupil of the Earth. Interestingly, many Christians throughout history have held to a view of a hollow Earth without realizing it. That's because for many centuries, Christians have viewed hell as a place underneath the crust of the earth, a place of fiery torment where condemned souls go. The Nazis, however, believe the opposite, that perhaps this place inside the earth was not for condemned souls, but a place where the master race, their ancestors, dwelled. Nazi belief in the location of the master race was based on a New Age theosophist who had a profound influence on their philosophy and esotericism. Helena Blavatsky suggested that inner earth was not the place of hell, but a place where the master race lived. Admiral Richard Byrd is arguably one of the most controversial voices on the subject of Hollow Earth. The truth is that Byrd organized a mission called Operation High Jump to stop Nazi ambitions in Antarctica even after World War II had ended. It was officially classified as a reconnaissance mission, yet several members of Operation High Jump died mysteriously.
Admiral, you make this sound a little crowded. Are there that many expeditions now there or en route there?
Well, you know, as I said, it's the most peaceful place in the world, but I don't think it will be for long, because of this intense interest on the part of other nations and this nation.
This latest expedition now on the way is a government expedition, I take it.
Yes, that's the government. I tell you one reason they're interested. It's by far the most valuable, important place left in the world for science. That's why the scientific groups all over the nation are really interested. But more important than that, it has to do with the future of the nation, those to come after us, or even during your lifetime.
The United States was on a mission to find whatever the Nazis hid in Antarctica. Shortly after Operation High Jump was completed, the United States began to promote the idea that the Earth was a solid ball with maybe a small core of magma, no entry or exit into the inner Earth, no settlements or secret bases underground, no potential escape for the Nazis. This idea came into full force using the US's newly created NASA. Byrd, who had begun to speak out about Hollow Earth towards the end of his life, died approximately 1 year before NASA was launched by the US. Certainly, if this was merely a Nazi claim, with no other substantiating commentary or research, then we could just simply disregard it. But it is a fact that Hollow Earth maps have been drawn for centuries. Famous members of the Illuminati, including Edgar Allan Poe and Jules Verne, alluded to Hollow Earth in their writings, that there was a world underneath the crust that we stand on. One of the most striking affirmations that an opening to another world was identified was made by Richard Byrd himself. Byrd's diary was mysteriously published in 1990 by a company called Inner Light. In the 68-page publication, Byrd suggested that a land existed beyond the pole where he was stationed for many years around the time of World War II. He made two mysterious bombshell statements in his diary. One was that he was ordered to keep silent about everything he had witnessed in Antarctica, and two, that he had witnessed the land beyond the pole, the center of the great unknown. Let us not forget that thousands of top-secret scientists in Germany seemed to disappear overnight at the end of the war. Some people believe that they escaped to the United States in something called Operation Paperclip, but some others are a bit more suspicious, thinking that perhaps these scientists made a quick exit off of the face of the world, literally, to the hollow reaches of the earth perhaps into the very inner quarters and to the location where another race of beings dwell. Did the Nazis go underground when the time came for their demise? And is this now the plan of the elites when World War III begins? Is the route of an escape in Antarctica? Performed a bizarre religious ceremony consecrating the land and water surrounding the continent. Francis has also done outreach to Patriarch Bartholomew of Turkey, in which both leaders voiced support for the migrant crisis and called for more migrants to enter Europe. In May, Francis met with Al-Azhar of Egypt, who is the head of Sunni Islam. In January, Francis became the third pontiff ever to visit Rome's major synagogue. He has also hosted Jewish religious and political leaders at the Vatican. In June, Francis outreached to the Armenians. In July, Pope Francis visited Poland and told all of the young people in the audience to, quote, believe in a new humanity. In August, Pope Francis won a huge initiative with U.S. Lutherans. A document called the Declaration of the Way was passed by a majority of 931 to 9. It recognizes that there is no longer church-dividing issues between Lutherans and Roman Catholics. This means that 3.7 million U.S. Lutherans are now absorbed into the new world religion. Also in July, Francis was the driving force behind a ceremony in the United States called Together, organized to bring all Christians in front of a 6,660-inch obelisk, or the Phallus of Osiris, for worship. One of the major symbols we saw at Together 2016 was the Ouroboros, which is the serpent eating its own tail. The earliest legend of the Ouroboros has to do with the coming of Osiris, the god of the underworld. The Ouroboros is a highly occult symbol signifying the end of an eon, or the end of time. In occultism, the end of one eon usually results in a reset, brought about by some cataclysmic event. When used together, the obelisk and the Ouroboros show us the coming of Osiris to inhabit his temple at the beginning of the next eon, which is the start of the Golden Age. The fact that this symbol was put on display throughout Francis's Together 2016 event is very demonic. What is Francis doing, and why is he doing it? The answer is that he's merely carrying out a role, playing his part in the creation of a new world religion. In previous videos, I have discussed a book written in 1908 by a man who was ill for much of his life. He writes about how a character named Father Francis defects from Roman Catholicism to follow the Antichrist. In this book, Father Francis would become the leading proponent of the new world religion and worship of the Antichrist. Just recently, Francis has used death of one of his priests in France and an assault on another priest in Belgium to invite Muslims into Christian cathedrals and churches for worship. For the past month, throughout Europe, since the attacks on the Catholic clergy, there has been a major drive by Francis to bring together, together, Muslim and Christian, and his efforts are working. He isn't attempting to evangelize these Muslims and to convert them. Instead, he is allowing them to bring worship of Allah into the churches in Europe. It has been prophesied that a religion of the New World Order would be established. It would dissolve boundaries between faiths. All would come together, united, in worship of the false light. There are Luciferians in history who predicted that Christianity and all religions would eventually collapse, making way for the religion of pure Luciferianism. A couple of these individuals was Luciferian and 33rd degree Grand Wizard Albert Pike, as well as Luciferian Helena Blavatsky. She viewed Christianity as a major challenge to the agenda of unveiling a new world religion. Christianity, in her opinion, would have to be done away with in order to unveil the new religion. We also have warnings from a former Jesuit who was murdered in 1999 that a one-world religion was in the making. It was an ecumenical religion that was being set up for all to follow. Malachi Martin told us a secret in an interview with Art Bell before he died. Luciferians had infiltrated the Vatican and were planning to set up a new religion, one they believed would last for 1,000 years.
Amongst Luciferian organizations, there is a prophecy that if they can invade the Citadel, and that's their name for the Vatican, they will have power for 1,000 years.
How close are they?
Very close.
You might remember when Francis came to America last September, we saw a major push toward the full ecumenical agenda. Francis's itinerary started on September 23rd, 2015, one day after he landed in the United States. He had set his sight on finalizing what his predecessor, Pope John XXIII, had set into motion on September 23, 1959. It was on this day John would offer a prayer that would begin the downfall of the Roman Catholic Church. A document would be penned declaring a new outreach to all religions in the world as children of the same God. Without a doubt, Vatican II is remembered as Catholicism's greatest push toward the new world religion. Vatican II would change everything about the actions of all future popes. It was now about piecing together a new religion, one that would be ready, waiting for the coming of the capstone. Pope Francis is truly preparing that new faith right now for all in the world to become a part of.